In 1982, a young boy disappeared on his way to the candy store, leaving a town filled with unanswered questions and broken hearts. Then, 35 years later, his abandoned bicycle was found, sparking a mystery that would change everything. Stay with me as we uncover the truth behind this long-lost story. Before we start, please tell me where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. I'm excited to hear from you. Now, let's begin. The sun sat like a lazy golden coin in the sky that afternoon, casting long, syrupy shadows across the quiet streets of Willow Creek. It was July 10th, 1982, one of those thick, humming summer days when the world felt paused in a slow, sun-baked breath. Cicadas chirped in the trees, dogs panted in shaded porches, and sprinklers ticked rhythmically across neatly trimmed front lawns. In a white house with green shutters on the corner of Maple and 3rd, 10-year-old Tommy Granger stood barefoot on the porch steps, a dollar bill in one hand and a quarter clenched tightly in the other. His mother, Linda, had just finished wiping her hands on a dish towel when she leaned out the screen door and called to him. "Just Mr. Daly's and back, you hear me? No stops. It's almost dinner." Tommy grinned, flashing that familiar gap in his front teeth, and gave her a quick salute like he'd seen in some war movie on TV. "Yes, ma'am." Then he was off, swinging his leg over his bright red Schwinn bike, the one he'd gotten for his birthday just that spring. It still had the shiny tassels on the handlebars and a baseball card clipped to the spokes, making a comforting clack-clack sound as he pedaled down the sidewalk. He was headed 3 blocks up to Daly's Candy Store, a cramped little place tucked between the laundromat and the hardware store, with a bell above the door and shelf crammed full of every kind of sweet a child could imagine. He'd been saving up his allowance all week for a small paper bag of penny candies and maybe a cold root beer. He was wearing his favorite blue t-shirt, the one with the faded Astros logo, and his canvas sneakers had holes worn into the toes. The last anyone ever saw of him was a neighbor watering her geraniums, waving at the boy as he sped by with the wind catching his hair and his eyes locked straight ahead. That was the beginning of the end. When dinner time came and Tommy hadn't returned, Linda assumed he'd stopped to play with his friend Robbie. By nightfall, when the shadows grew long and the streetlights flickered on without him home, her pulse began to race. Mark, Tommy's father, had just gotten in from his shift at the paper mill when Linda met him at the door, eyes wide and breath short. "He hasn't come home. He said he was going straight to Daly's." They called Robbie's house. No one had seen him. Emily, Tommy's 13-year-old sister, rode her own bike around the block calling his name, but there was only the whisper of leaves and the distant hum of the highway. Mark called the police by 8:40 p.m. By 9:30, cruisers began rolling through the neighborhood, shining spotlights into bushes, knocking on doors. Neighbors emerged from homes in their pajamas with flashlights and worried expressions, organizing a search that fanned out into the surrounding streets, into the woods, down by the creek, even into the rail yard on the town's edge. But there was no sign of Tommy. No shoe, no candy bag, no voice calling back. The town had never seen anything like it. By morning, flyers were being taped to light poles, photos of Tommy smiling from beneath his baseball cap. Local radio stations broadcast the description of the boy and his bike. Red Schwinn, silver handlebars, blue tassels. Children were kept home from school camps. Parents held their little ones tighter. Strangers suddenly seemed suspicious. For the first time in anyone's memory, Willow Creek did not feel safe. Mr. Daly, the kindly owner of the candy store, swore Tommy never came in that day. "I watched the shop from the counter like I always do," he said, wringing his cap in his hands. "I never saw that boy. Not once." Emily began drawing her brother's face in chalk on the sidewalk, sketching the contours of his eyes like she'd memorized them. Linda sat on the front porch, barely moving, the screen door creaking gently in the breeze behind her, whispering his name like a prayer. The police worked the case hard in those early days. Canines were brought in. The creek was dragged. Tips came in from all over the county. Someone claimed to see a boy matching Tommy's description climbing into a green van. Another swore they heard a scream near the old grain silos. But every lead ran dry. Nothing fit. It was as though the boy had simply vanished into the warm breath of a summer afternoon, leaving behind only questions and a yawning ache in the heart of a family. Weeks passed. The flyers faded under sun and rain. The red Schwinn was never found. The neighbors slowly stopped asking if there was news. Emily grew quiet. Linda stopped cooking. Mark started sleeping on the couch. On what would have been Tommy's first day of 5th grade, his empty seat in class sat untouched, a small arrangement of sunflowers left in his place. His teacher couldn't finish the roll call, and in the center of town, the rusting bike rack outside Daly's candy store kept one space empty. Always the space where Tommy would have left his bike. The days after Tommy vanished turned into weeks, and the weeks folded into months like brittle pages in an old, unfinished diary. The Granger house, once full of the small chaos of a young boy's life, now settled into a quiet too heavy to name. The click of the screen door, the creak of the hallway floorboards, even the sound of the old grandfather clock in the living room all became reminders of his absence. His room was left untouched. His baseball glove sat on the windowsill, fingers curved as if still waiting for a game of catch that would never come. His books lay open on his desk, the corner of a comic book sticking out as if he might run back in any second and pick up where he left off. Linda couldn't bring herself to move anything. She'd walk in some mornings, just stand there, breathing in what little scent of her son still lingered in the air, sweat, grass, bubblegum, that sweet childhood smell, and then slowly back out before the tears could catch up to her. Mark, ever the quiet man, tried to stay strong, but his shoulders began to slump a little more each day. He stopped fixing things around the house, stopped whistling as he shaved. The only sound from him was the flick of his Zippo lighter as he lit cigarette after cigarette out on the back porch, staring out into the trees like they might give him an answer. Emily, barely 13, bore in silence too. Her laugh disappeared first, then her appetite, then her grades. She drew less and less. Sometimes Linda would find her curled up on Tommy's bed, clutching his pillow like she could squeeze memory into flesh. The town, once so full of sympathy and support, began to move on. Halloween came and went without Tommy. So did Thanksgiving. By Christmas, the search had slowed to a trickle. No more nightly calls from the police, no more hopeful knocks at the door. People stopped asking if there was news. Some even whispered that maybe Tommy had run away. Others, crueler still, speculated darker things. But the Grangers held on, clinging to hope like it was the only thing keeping their bones from shattering. Linda wrote letters to the sheriff's office weekly, kept calling the detective assigned to the case even when his voice began to sound distant, rehearsed. "We're doing all we can, Mrs. Granger," he would say, but the words rang hollow. By spring of 1983, nearly a year since Tommy disappeared, the house felt like a museum of grief. One evening, after Emily had gone to bed and the news had ended with the usual silent credits, Linda turned to Mark and said, "We need to go back to Daly's. We need to walk the path again. All of it." Mark didn't answer right away, just stared at the static on the TV screen like it was telling him something. Then he nodded. Early the next morning, they retraced Tommy's route. 3 blocks down Maple, a left on Jefferson, past the flower shop and the vacant lot where the old theater used to be. Linda pointed out where Mrs. Conrad had seen him last, way from her yard. Mark stopped at the crosswalk near the fire station. His bike would have hit this bump, he murmured, towing the crack in the sidewalk. They stood in front of Daly's candy store a long time. The bells still jingled when they pushed the door open, and the place smelled the same, licorice, sugar, and faint dust. Mr. Daly was behind the counter, as always, but his face aged in just 1 year. When he saw them, he stilled. No word yet. Linda shook her head. "Nothing," she said. "Not a trace." But something about being there again stirred something deeper, something restless. Linda began to collect every scrap of information she could. She made copies of the police report, started pinning maps to the basement wall. She marked the streets with red ink, cataloged witness statements, even plotted the position of the sun that day based on old weather reports. Mark helped when he could, but mostly he watched. "This won't bring him back," he said gently once, but Linda just stared at him hollow-eyed. "Then it's all I have left," she replied. Emily grew wary of it all, the way her mother muttered to herself at the kitchen table, The way the living room filled with stacks of documents and hand-drawn maps. She wanted to forget, to escape, to be a teenage girl again. But every time she tried to laugh at a friend's joke or focus on a math problem, Tommy's face appeared, grinning, oblivious, riding off into the light of that terrible day. So she started writing about him. In journals, on loose-leaf paper, on the inside covers of her schoolbooks. Memories, dreams, what she wished she could tell him. Some nights, she'd lie in bed whispering into the dark. "Where are you, Tommy? Why won't you come home?" Time crawled. Years began to slip by. New families moved into the neighborhood. Mr. Daly closed the candy store in '87 after a stroke. The building sat vacant, the window coated in grime, the bell above the door silent at last. But the Granger house never let go. Every birthday, they left a balloon tied to the mailbox. Every July 10th, Linda baked a cake. Emily graduated high school with a photo of Tommy tucked into her gown. By 1992, a full decade had passed since that summer day. No remains, no witnesses, no answers. Just a red Schwinn bike that never came home. And yet, through it all, Linda never stopped believing that somewhere out there, her boy was still alive. By the mid-90s, Tommy's name had all but vanished from the headlines, and the energy that once surrounded his disappearance now lay dormant beneath layers of newer tragedies, fresher crimes, and changing town priorities. What had once rallied neighbors together in frantic hope now existed only in brittle clippings yellowing in the bottom drawers of filing cabinets and in the fading corners of memory where grief slowly settled like dust. The Grangers remained in the same modest home on Maple Street, their lives a quiet echo of what they once were. Linda's once bright eyes, sharp and determined, now dulled from years of waiting, from decades of not knowing. Her detective boards still covered one wall in the basement, though the pins and thread had stopped moving. The maps had curled at the edges, and some Polaroids had fallen to the ground and stayed there. She hadn't added a new note in over a year, but she refused to take anything down. "It's not over," she'd say if anyone asked. "We just haven't seen the next page yet." Mark's silence had grown deeper with time. After retiring from his job at the plant in '94, he started spending long afternoons fishing at Haven Creek, the same spot where he'd taken Tommy as a boy. It wasn't about catching anything anymore. It was about stillness, about routine, about finding a place where the world didn't ask for explanations. When friends passed by and offered a polite nod or tried to start a conversation, he would respond with a half smile and a short grunt, then return to the line. If they mentioned Tommy, he'd simply lower his gaze and tighten his grip on the rod. There were no new words left to say. Emily had gone off to college, choosing a school several states away where no one knew her as the girl whose brother disappeared. She studied psychology, perhaps hoping to understand the lingering ache that had wrapped itself around her family like ivy around a decaying wall. But even from a distance, she couldn't escape the weight. Every year on July 10th, she called home and spoke quietly to her mother, and every time she returned for holidays, she felt the silence in the house press down like a ceiling sagging under time. She brought boyfriends home only once, each of them leaving confused by the heaviness that no photograph or explanation could quite convey. As the years marched on, leads dried up. The local sheriff's office reassigned the case twice, each time with a younger detective who approached the file with brief enthusiasm, only to conclude that there simply wasn't enough to go on. No witnesses, no physical evidence beyond the original scene, no fingerprints, no blood, just a vanished boy and a missing red bike. Occasionally, a tip would come in from out of state, someone who swore they saw a boy matching Tommy's description at a truck stop, a homeless shelter, even once at a circus passing through Michigan, but none of them led anywhere solid. One anonymous call in 1997 suggested the boy had been taken by a long-haul driver and buried somewhere near the old quarry. A search was conducted, cadaver dogs brought in, even a few bones were found, but they turned out to belong to a deer. Linda sat outside the quarry gates all night afterward, just staring into the dark trees, her coat pulled tight against the wind. By the early 2000s, technology had changed the landscape of missing persons cases. DNA testing, internet databases, facial aging software. These were new tools in the arsenal. Emily, now working as a counselor in Chicago, convinced her parents to submit Tommy's baby teeth, which Linda had kept in a tiny blue box in the back of her dresser drawer, to the national database. Just in case, she said, though the words trembled on her lips. She also uploaded Tommy's details to every missing child website she could find. She created a Facebook page, Find Tommy Granger, where she posted childhood photos, digitally aged renderings, even stories about his favorite foods and quirks. A few strangers followed. Some left comments. Most scrolled past. In 2009, a documentary filmmaker passing through New England learned about the case while interviewing families of long-term missing children. He asked Linda for an interview, and she agreed, her voice shaking as she spoke into the camera. He was on his way to buy Jawbreakers, she said, her fingers clutched tightly in her lap. How does a boy just disappear on the way to the candy store? The documentary aired on a late-night public access channel and found modest traction online. For a few weeks, Linda's phone rang again. Reporters, curious viewers, a psychic from Arizona who claimed Tommy was alive and well in Mexico. But nothing ever came of it. Another small flame, another puff of hope extinguished in the cold. One summer night in 2011, while cleaning the attic, Mark found a box labeled Tommy, Summer '82. Inside were forgotten things. A drawing Tommy had made of a pirate ship, a small slingshot, a half-used bottle of blue bubble soap. There was also a cassette tape, a recording of Tommy practicing his reading into a tape recorder. Mark brought it down to the old player in the den. As the tape hissed to life, Tommy's young voice filled the room. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Jack, he read with halting confidence. Linda came in halfway through and sank slowly to the floor. They sat together and listened to the full tape 3 times before silence returned. That night, Mark held Linda's hand for the first time in years. And still, the mystery hung in the air like fog. No closure, no answers. Only time pressing forward while one family remained suspended, anchored by a boy who never made it home from the candy store. The summer of 2017 arrived with an unexpected chill in the air, an eerie foreshadowing that change was stirring beneath the calm surface of the sleepy town of Maplewood. For decades, the disappearance of Tommy Granger was a story that belonged to the past, whispered quietly by the few who had not forgotten. Yet that summer, the story burst back into the light in a way no one could have predicted. It began on a humid July afternoon, with the discovery of an old bicycle buried beneath years of dirt and overgrowth near the edge of Haven Creek Park, a place where Tommy had played and Mark often fished in search of peace. The bike's red paint was chipped and faded, the tires flat and dry-rotted, but there was no mistaking the rusted tag on the frame. Granger. The news spread through town like wildfire. The faded symbol of the vanished boy's last known possession was suddenly tangible again, a relic from a lost time that reignited old memories and stirred the quiet hearts of those who had lived through the long years of waiting. Linda, who had not set foot in the park for years, stood there with the police officers, staring at the bike as if it held the secret to everything. Her hands trembled as she reached out, touching the metal frame gently, tears glistening in her eyes. "Tommy's bike," she whispered. "It's been here all this time." Detectives reopened the cold case file immediately, digging through every scrap of evidence with fresh eyes and new technologies. The area where the bike was found had been searched many times before, but the dense brush and changes in the creek's course over the years had hidden it well. The discovery rekindled hope across the town and beyond, sparking renewed interest in the decades-old mystery. Neighbors who had once moved on found themselves drawn back into a shared past, organizing searches, sharing memories, and rallying for answers. Meanwhile, Emily, who had returned home to care for her aging parents, found herself at the heart of the renewed investigation. She met with the lead detective, a younger man named Ryan, whose respectful but firm manner was a stark contrast to the tired officials who had handled the case before. Ryan listened intently as Emily recounted the family's story, their tireless efforts, and the years of silence that followed Tommy's disappearance. Together, they began piecing together new leads, revisiting old witnesses and scouring social media for any hint of the boy's fate. But the breakthrough didn't come from the police alone. It was a chance encounter. A local man named Jerry, a retired park ranger who remembered the day Tommy vanished vividly, who recalled seeing a suspicious figure near the bike trail shortly after the boy disappeared. Jerry described a tall man in a dark coat who had been lurking near the candy store and the park entrance. This man had vanished without a trace, and at the time, the detail had been dismissed as irrelevant. Now, with the bike's discovery, Jerry's memory took on new weight. Linda and Mark accompanied Jerry to the spot he described. As they stood together on the worn path, Linda's heart pounded with a mix of fear and hope. Could this be the clue they had been waiting for? Was there finally a way to unravel the tangled threads of Tommy's disappearance? For the first time in decades, the Granger family felt the stirrings of a truth long buried beneath grief and time, ready to surface and change everything. The discovery of Tommy's bike near Haven Creek stirred more than just hope. It unearthed old wounds, memories that many had tried to bury deep beneath the surface of their lives. The Grangers found themselves drawn back into the murky waters of 1982, a time when their world had shattered with a single, terrifying disappearance. Now, with the physical reminder of that day in their hands, they were forced to confront not only what had happened, but also what might still be hidden in the shadows of the past. Detective Ryan, thorough and methodical, organized a renewed search of the surrounding area. This time, armed with modern forensic tools, ground-penetrating radar, improved cadaver dogs, and a dedicated team. His hope was to find any clue that had escaped detection all those years ago. The search was painstaking and slow, the forest thick with underbrush and the ground soft from years of seasonal rain. But every step they took felt like a step closer to finally pulling the story from the silence. Meanwhile, Jerry, the retired park ranger, shared more memories, fragments of a time long past, but still vivid to his mind. He recalled seeing a small campsite hidden in a thicket near the creek, one that no one had reported. At the time, it seemed an innocuous part of the woods, a place teenagers might sneak away to smoke or drink, but now it took on a sinister edge. Ryan's team went back to that site and found evidence of an old fire pit, discarded cans, and remnants of a worn blanket. Details that might have been overlooked before, but now suggested someone had spent a significant amount of time there. Linda's heart raced when she heard the news. Could this campsite be connected to Tommy's disappearance? The idea that the boy might have been held somewhere so close, yet hidden so well, was both chilling and heartbreakingly real. She joined the searchers whenever she could, combing the woods with a fierce determination that surprised even those who knew her best. Every snapped twig, every rustle of leaves, felt like a whisper from the past, a clue waiting to be uncovered. Emily, struggling with the weight of the past and the rekindled hope, dug through old boxes in the attic, hoping to find anything that might jog her memory or provide a lead. Among dusty school notebooks and faded photographs, she found a letter, a note Tommy had scribbled for her the day before he disappeared. It was a simple message, filled with childish excitement about the candy store trip, but now it carried a heavy significance. Holding the paper in her hands, she felt a connection to the brother she had lost in time, a reminder that Tommy had once been there, laughing and dreaming, before silence took hold. The town responded with a mixture of sorrow and solidarity. News outlets returned to the story, interviewing the Grangers and revisiting the old case. Volunteers signed up for search parties, rekindling a community spirit that had lain dormant for years. The local church organized prayer vigils, and neighbors shared stories of Tommy, of the shy boy with a crooked smile who loved baseball and dreamed of becoming a firefighter. Each memory was a thread weaving together a tapestry of a life interrupted, but not forgotten. The renewed attention also brought discomfort. Old suspicions surfaced, uncomfortable questions about the people who had been around that summer in '82. Whispers about strange visitors, unexplained sightings, and rumors of a drifter who had passed through town circulated quietly but persistently. Ryan's team interviewed anyone who might shed light on these rumors, hoping to separate fact from fear. One late afternoon, Linda received an anonymous letter slipped under her door. The envelope was plain, the handwriting unfamiliar. Inside was a single photograph, blurry, grainy, showing a man standing near the candy store, his face obscured by shadow. On the back, a note. He knows more than he lets on. Look closer. It was a cryptic message, but it reignited the fire in Linda's heart. She showed the photo to Ryan, who promised to investigate every lead, no matter how faint. The past was no longer just a memory. It was alive, pulsing with unanswered questions and the hope of finally unveiling the truth. For the Grangers, the road ahead was uncertain, but they faced it together, bound by love and a relentless search for the boy who had vanished on his way to the candy store all those years ago. As the investigation deepened, the photograph left Linda and the family with more questions than answers. The man in the grainy image was unrecognizable, his face hidden beneath a hat pulled low and a coat collar turned up, blending into the shadows of the candy store's worn exterior. Yet there was something unnerving about his posture, a quiet menace that lingered like a cold breath across the decades. The note, "He knows more than he lets on," haunted Linda's thoughts, pulling her deeper into a web of uncertainty. Detective Ryan intensified his efforts to uncover the identity of the stranger. He combed through Old Town records, police reports from the summer of 1982, and questioned longtime residents who might remember any unfamiliar faces. Stories of a drifter, a man passing through Maplewood briefly before disappearing, surfaced in hushed conversations. Some recalled him as quiet, others as unsettling, but no one seemed to know his name or where he came from. Meanwhile, Linda's memory sharpened. She remembered that summer's eerie stillness, the odd feeling that had settled over the neighborhood like a thick fog. Tommy had been unusually quiet for days, almost as if he sensed something she couldn't understand then. Linda wished she could rewind time, to hold him just a little longer, to protect him from the unseen danger that had slipped past their watchful eyes. The townspeople's unease grew palpable. Long-forgotten stories of missing items, strange noises in the night, and unexplained disappearances of neighborhood cats all took on a sinister significance in light of the photograph. Old friends and neighbors gathered to talk, their voices low and serious as they pieced together fragments of the past, trying to connect the stranger to the shadows cast over the community. Ryan found a breakthrough when a local archivist uncovered a faded newspaper clipping from a neighboring town, describing a man matching the stranger's vague description. The article spoke of a transient with a history of petty crimes and a trail of mysterious disappearances following him wherever he went. His path seemed to intersect eerily with Maplewood during the summer of 1982. Ryan arranged for a forensic artist to reconstruct the man's face from the photograph, hoping it might jog memories or bring forward witnesses. Linda spent restless nights awake, haunted by the possibility that this stranger was the key to unlocking the mystery, yet terrified of what the truth might reveal. She confided in Mark, her voice trembling. What if he's still out there, watching, waiting? Mark held her hands tightly, a silent promise that they would face whatever came together. Meanwhile, Emily unearthed another piece of the puzzle. Among Tommy's old belongings, she found a worn pocket watch that none of the family remembered, engraved with initials that didn't match any of their relatives. The watch was old-fashioned, its face cracked, but the hands still ticking faintly. She brought it to Ryan, who suspected it might have belonged to the stranger or someone connected to him. The sense of urgency grew. The police expanded their search to include individuals connected to the man in the photo. Old acquaintances, possible accomplices, anyone who might hold the missing pieces. Every day brought new questions, every lead a thread, pulling them further into a labyrinth of secrets, some buried deliberately, others lost to time. At the same time, the town's atmosphere was thick with anticipation and fear. Some residents wanted to forget the past, wary of reopening wounds. Others, fueled by hope and determination, organized town hall meetings, pushing for more resources and community involvement. The story of Tommy Granger, once confined to old news reports and fading memories, had become a shared quest, one that united generations. Linda found solace in small moments. The way the evening light filtered through the kitchen window, the familiar creak of the old wooden floor, the gentle hum of cicadas outside. These were the threads of a life she refused to let unravel. She clung to hope as fiercely as she did to the memory of her son, believing that after all these years, the truth was not just a distant dream, but a promise waiting to be fulfilled. The renewed investigation stirred memories in the town's oldest residents, but it was Emily who made a discovery that would change everything. While helping Linda sort through dusty boxes stored away in the attic, she found a battered leather-bound diary, its edges frayed and pages yellowed with age. The cover bore no name, but Emily felt compelled to open it. Inside were handwritten entries dated from the summer of 1982, the same summer Tommy disappeared. The diary belonged to a local teenager named Sarah Collins, a quiet girl who had been Tommy's classmate. Her words painted a vivid picture of a neighborhood from a perspective no one had considered, the silent observer who noticed the little things others missed. Sarah wrote about the mysterious man in the photograph, whom she called the Shadow, describing his movements around the candy store and how he seemed to watch the children from a distance. Emily read aloud passages to Linda and Mark, the diary revealing Sarah's growing unease and suspicions. She documented strange encounters, how the man had approached Tommy one afternoon, offering him a ride, and how Tommy had declined nervously. Sarah's entries hinted at something darker, a fear that gripped the community but remained unspoken. "He's not from here," Sarah wrote. "He doesn't belong, and I'm afraid he's waiting for something." The diary also mentioned a hidden place near the creek, a small hollow beneath a fallen tree where Sarah and her friends would sometimes gather. She believed it was the key to understanding the stranger's presence, a secret spot where he might have left clues or where something important might be hidden. This was the first tangible lead that suggested the mystery wasn't just about Tommy's disappearance, but also about the man who had quietly haunted their town. Linda's heart pounded as the diary brought the past rushing back. Sarah's observations, once dismissed as teenage paranoia, now felt chillingly real. The family reached out to the Collins family, hoping they might remember more. Sarah had passed away years ago, but her mother was still alive and willing to share memories. She spoke of a daughter who was brave and observant but frightened by what she'd seen that summer. Detective Ryan used the diary as a blueprint to search the creek area more thoroughly. The team scanned the woods near the fallen tree Sarah had described, uncovering faint markings on the bark, scratches that looked like initials. Beneath the roots, they found a rusted metal box, sealed tight but surprisingly intact after all these years. Inside the box were several items: a faded photograph of Tommy smiling beside his bike, a crumpled candy wrapper from the store, and a folded map with an X marked near the creek. Most intriguing was a small, hand-carved wooden figure, a token of friendship or a protective charm, perhaps left behind by Sarah or someone else who cared deeply for Tommy. The discovery energized the investigation, rekindling hope that the pieces might finally come together. The diary had provided a voice to a silent witness, and the hidden box offered a tangible connection to the boy they had lost. For Linda, these were fragments of a puzzle she had spent decades trying to solve, pieces that now promised to illuminate the darkness that had long engulfed her family. As the community gathered to hear the latest developments, the atmosphere shifted from despair to cautious optimism. The past was no longer an impenetrable wall, but a path to understanding. And for the Grangers, the diary was a beacon, guiding them closer to the truth that had remained elusive for far too long. The discovery of the hidden box near the creek breathed new life into the long-stalled investigation. With the diary in hand and the small wooden figure in her pocket, Linda felt a flicker of hope she hadn't dared to entertain for decades. The town, once shrouded in silence and suspicion, now buzzed quietly with whispered theories and tentative plans for what might come next. Detective Ryan assembled a team of volunteers to explore the dense woods where the box had been found. Among them were old friends of Tommy, now grown, who remembered the carefree days of their childhood spent wandering those very paths. The creek, once a place of laughter and innocent adventures, now held a weight of sorrow and unanswered questions. As they pushed deeper into the forest, they uncovered signs of long-forgotten trails, worn clear by the passage of feet, but slowly swallowed by time. Beneath the thick canopy of leaves, the air was cool and heavy with the scent of earth and moss, as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. Linda's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and anticipation, each step carrying her closer to the memories she had buried for so long. The marked spot on the map led them to a shallow hollow, surrounded by twisted roots and fallen branches. It was exactly as Sarah's diary had described, a secret refuge hidden away from the world. Here, the group found traces of what seemed to be a campsite: charred wood from an old fire pit, scattered fragments of broken glass, and a faded piece of cloth caught on a thorny bush. Among the debris was a small, rusted tin box, locked tight but vulnerable to the years of weathering. With careful hands, Detective Ryan pried it open, revealing its contents: a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon and a collection of old photographs. The letters, though brittle, were legible, penned in a hurried scrawl that spoke of fear and a desperate hope for safety. Reading through the correspondence, Linda and Ryan uncovered a story within the story, a series of secret messages exchanged between Tommy and a mysterious correspondent. The letters spoke of a plan to escape, of whispered warnings about the stranger, known only as the Shadow, and of a promise to meet again. The photographs depicted moments of stolen joy: Tommy smiling in the sunlit woods, the candy store bustling with children, and a shadowy figure lurking in the distance. These revelations sent shockwaves through the community. The letters suggested that Tommy had not simply vanished without a trace, but had been part of something larger, a hidden narrative intertwined with fear, friendship, and courage. Linda felt a deep ache, knowing her son had fought in silence, holding on to hope even as the darkness closed in. The investigation now took a new direction. Who was the correspondent? Could they still be found? What had become of Tommy in those critical hours? The pieces were no longer scattered. They formed a fragile mosaic waiting to be completed. The town's residents rallied around the Grangers, offering support and sharing memories, determined to finally bring closure to a mystery that had haunted them all. For Linda, every discovery was bittersweet. Each clue unearthed a part of Tommy's story, but also reopened wounds that never fully healed. Yet she pressed on, driven by love and the unwavering belief that after 35 years, the truth was finally within reach. The woods, once a silent witness to loss, had begun to speak, whispering secrets that only those willing to listen could hear. The letters and photographs found in the woods painted a haunting image of a man known only as the Shadow. Descriptions were sparse but chilling: an unassuming figure lurking on the edges of town, never fully seen but always present. Sarah's diary and the letters hinted that this man might have been watching Tommy for weeks before his disappearance. No one had ever spoken openly about him, but now his presence loomed larger than ever in the minds of those who once lived in fear. Detective Ryan, now deeply invested, began digging into the town's old records, searching for any trace of the mysterious stranger. The small town's police files were thin, but whispers among the older residents brought fragments of a story to light: a drifter who had arrived just months before Tommy vanished. He was said to have taken odd jobs, never staying long, and had a habit of watching children from afar, making neighbors uneasy. The Grangers listened intently as new witnesses came forward. An elderly couple recalled seeing the man near the candy store, always alone and silent. A local store clerk remembered a strange exchange between the man and Tommy on that fateful day. He asked Tommy if he wanted a ride. The clerk said, voice trembling. Tommy shook his head and rode away fast. I never saw him again. Though decades had passed, the shadow of fear clung tightly to the memories. The man's face remained elusive. No photographs, no identification, only a name whispered in fear. Ryan's search extended beyond town records to state and federal databases, hoping to find a match. Meanwhile, The community grappled with the unsettling truth that someone had watched their children, their families, and no one had stopped him. Linda felt a mixture of rage and sorrow. The idea that this stranger might have taken her son was almost unbearable, yet gave her something to fight against. She joined forces with others who had lost loved ones in mysterious circumstances, determined to push for justice. The story of the shadow became a catalyst, stirring long-buried fears and unresolved pain, but also a communal desire to protect the future. In the quiet moments, Linda often thought about Tommy, the boy who loved his bike, the one who never made it to the candy store. She pictured him growing up, escaping the darkness that had claimed him or trapped somewhere, waiting to be found. The letters suggested hope, but the shadow cast by the stranger was a grim reminder of the dangers hidden in everyday life. Detective Ryan's persistence finally yielded a breakthrough. A partial fingerprint found on one of the letters matched a man with a record for minor offenses, known to have drifted through towns like theirs. The man had vanished from official records around the time Tommy disappeared, but a name emerged: Joseph Joe Mallory, a drifter with a reputation for unsettling behavior. No one knew his whereabouts now, but the pieces were beginning to connect. As the investigation deepened, the community's quiet fear turned to cautious resolve. The stranger's shadow was no longer just a story whispered in fear. It was a real person who might finally face the truth. Linda's hope swelled, mingling with the sorrow that had defined so many years. For her, every step forward was a step closer to bringing light to the darkest chapter of her life. The name Joseph Joe Mallory, dusty and forgotten, suddenly ignited the cold trail with a flicker of heat. Detective Ryan, armed with this new lead, plunged into a labyrinth of faded police reports, mugshots yellowed with age, and whispered rumors from towns where Mallory had passed like a ghost. This man had left a mark wherever he went. Small towns trembling at the presence of a stranger who watched children with cold, unreadable eyes. But no concrete proof had ever tied him to Tommy's disappearance, until now. Linda clung to every detail, every scrap of evidence like a lifeline. She met with old acquaintances who remembered Mallory, bartenders who saw him nursing drinks in dimly lit bars, store owners who shivered when he stepped inside. There were stories of Mallory disappearing abruptly, leaving behind unanswered questions and uneasy feelings that lingered long after. His pattern was one of evasion and shadows, always slipping away just before he could be confronted. One afternoon, Ryan found a faded news clipping from 1981, reporting a break-in at a cabin near the outskirts of a neighboring county. The description of the suspect fit Mallory perfectly. Inside the cabin, authorities found children's belongings, small toys, pieces of clothing, and, chillingly, a crudely carved wooden figure much like the one found with Tommy's diary. This discovery sent shivers through the investigation. Was Mallory keeping trophies? Had Tommy been there? The search for Mallory grew urgent. The man had vanished just months after the break-in and before Tommy's disappearance. Ryan coordinated with state police to track any recent sightings or arrests, but Mallory seemed to have slipped beyond reach. It was as if he had melted into the shadows from which he came. Linda, meanwhile, found herself reliving painful memories, torn between hope and despair. Every revelation opened a door she'd kept shut, flooding her with feelings she thought time had softened. But the discovery of the wooden figure and its connection to Mallory made her believe the nightmare was far from over. Tommy's disappearance was not an accident. It was part of something sinister and deliberate. In the quiet corners of the town's library, Ryan uncovered reports of similar disappearances in other states, spanning decades. Mallory's name appeared in connection with transient camps and abandoned motels. A pattern emerged, children disappearing near places he'd been spotted, always followed by silence and fear. The truth was beginning to form, a mosaic of pain stitched together by broken lives and lost years. The town's residents, long resigned to the past, felt a stirring of unrest. Families who once locked their doors in fear now gathered to share stories, to remember, and to demand answers. The legacy of Mallory was a dark shadow cast over their collective memory, but it also ignited a spark of determination. They would not let Tommy's story be forgotten. Linda's resolve hardened. With renewed strength, she vowed to fight until the truth came out. The years of waiting, the endless silence, the haunting what-ifs, they all pointed to one thing: justice for Tommy. And now, with Mallory's name at the center, that justice felt within reach. As the investigation dug deeper into Joseph Joe Mallory's shadowy past, the town found itself caught in a swell of emotions: fear, anger, and a fragile hope. But it was a sudden, unexpected confession that shook everything to its core. A man, long silent and unseen, stepped forward from the past with a story that would finally illuminate the dark corners where Tommy's fate had been hidden for decades. It was a chilly autumn evening when Detective Ryan received the call. The voice on the other end was hesitant but resolute. A man named Carl Jennings, once a drifter himself, who had crossed paths with Mallory years ago. Jennings carried a burden of guilt and secrecy, and after all this time, he could no longer stay silent. He claimed to have witnessed Mallory's darkest deeds, including what happened to Tommy on that fateful day. Linda listened, breathless, as Ryan relayed the confession. Carl described a rundown farmhouse far outside town, a place where Mallory had hidden, keeping children captive in horrifying conditions. He spoke of the boy's bravery and despair, the fleeting moments of hope that flickered even in the bleakest days. Carl's words were painful but precious, proof that Tommy had fought, had not simply vanished without a trace. The town was stunned. The farmhouse, long abandoned and covered in vines, became a focal point for the investigation. Police combed the property, finding signs of habitation: old blankets, scraps of food, and chilling reminders of a life disrupted. But Tommy was not there. Carl's confession hinted that Mallory had moved the boy, perhaps to keep him hidden or to escape the law. Linda's heart ached with a strange mixture of relief and torment. The truth was finally surfacing, yet the mystery deepened. Where had Tommy gone? What had become of him? The answers were still beyond reach, but for the first time in years, a path forward had appeared. The community rallied around Linda, offering support and solidarity. The long silence that had gripped their town was breaking, replaced by a determined call for justice and healing. Carl Jennings' bravery in coming forward gave them hope that no matter how deep the darkness, truth could shine through. Detective Ryan continued to press for more information from Carl, piecing together the timeline and details. Each revelation brought new questions, but also renewed determination. Tommy's story was no longer a closed chapter, but a living narrative demanding answers, closure, and peace. Months passed since Carl Jennings' confession, but the search for Tommy remained a puzzle missing its final piece. Then, unexpectedly, a discovery rekindled hope. A faded letter, hidden in an old shoebox among Carl's belongings, surfaced, words penned in a shaky hand, possibly from Tommy himself. The letter was brief but filled with longing and fear, a whisper from the past that refused to be silenced. It spoke of a boy trapped yet yearning for freedom, a boy who had never given up hope despite the cruel hand fate dealt him. Linda held the fragile paper with trembling hands, tears blurring her vision as she read each word aloud. The letter spoke of dark rooms and cold nights, but also of kindness, small acts of compassion from an unknown protector. It spoke of dreams of home and the desperate wish to be found. Though the letter did not reveal Tommy's whereabouts, it confirmed something powerful. He was alive when the note was written. The news of the letter spread quickly through the town, reigniting a collective determination to find Tommy. People who had once felt helpless now felt united by the fragile thread of hope that letter provided. Linda shared the letter's contents with the police, who examined the handwriting and paper for clues about its origin. Experts suggested it was written years after Tommy's disappearance, confirming that he had survived beyond that dark day in 1982. Detective Ryan expanded the search beyond local boundaries, reaching out to neighboring states and organizations specializing in missing children cases. The letter became a beacon, guiding efforts and renewing promises to uncover the truth. It also raised questions. How had the letter ended up in Carl's possession? Had he been protecting Tommy, or simply an unwitting keeper of secrets? Linda grappled with mixed emotions. Relief mingled with fresh anguish. Hope was tinged with uncertainty. The letter was both a gift and a challenge, a call to continue the quest, no matter how long it took. It transformed the narrative from a story of loss to one of resilience and courage. As the investigation pressed on, the community remained steadfast. They honored Tommy's memory with renewed vigor, cherishing the fragile hope that one day, the boy who vanished on his way to the candy store might finally come home. The journey was far from over, but the letter was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, the light of hope can never be extinguished. The day finally arrived that no one in the small town dared to believe would ever come. The day Tommy Mallory walked back into the town square, not as a ghost of the past, but as a man reborn. It was a quiet morning, the sun casting a gentle glow over familiar streets that had long held the echoes of unanswered questions and shattered hopes. Linda stood at the edge of the crowd, heart pounding, eyes scanning every face, every movement, waiting for the impossible. Tommy appeared slowly, his figure weathered yet unmistakable. His eyes held stories no words could convey, stories of survival, sorrow, and resilience. As he crossed the threshold into the town he once called home, whispers rippled through the crowd, a mixture of disbelief and overwhelming joy. The years melted away, and the missing boy was suddenly present, alive and whole. His reunion with Linda was quiet, but profoundly moving. Tears streamed down her face as she embraced the son she thought she had lost forever. Tommy's voice was steady but soft, carrying the weight of decades spent hidden away from the world. He recounted pieces of his journey, the cruelty endured, the rare kindnesses that sustained him, and the relentless hope that kept him holding on. The community gathered, sharing their stories and tears, their pain and their healing. The truth that had once seemed unreachable was now a reality. Tommy's return was more than a reunion. It was a healing balm for every broken heart in that town. The years of searching, waiting, and hoping culminated in this moment of grace. Tommy's story became a testament to the power of love and perseverance, a reminder that even in the darkest times, light can find its way back. Linda, now stronger and wiser, knew that while the past could never be erased, the future held new promises, promises of peace, understanding, and a life reclaimed. As the sun set that day, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, the town breathed a collective sigh of relief. The boy who vanished on his way to the candy store had come home, and with him, a hope renewed for all who had waited so long. In the weeks that followed Tommy Mallory's return, the town entered a new chapter, one filled with both reflection and renewal. The boy who had vanished more than 3 decades ago was now a man with scars visible and invisible, carrying memories that had shaped his life far beyond what anyone could have imagined. But more than that, Tommy carried a message of healing, forgiveness, and the enduring strength of family. Linda and Tommy spent long hours reconnecting, piecing together the fragments of lost time with stories, laughter, and sometimes tears. For Linda, it was a bittersweet journey, a reminder of the years spent in darkness, but also of the incredible resilience that had kept her searching. The community, once fractured by suspicion and pain, found itself slowly mending, united by the miracle they had witnessed. Tommy's experience became a beacon of hope not only for his town, but for others grappling with loss and uncertainty. His courage to face the past and build a future inspired countless people to believe in the possibility of redemption and the power of unwavering love. The local school even organized events to share his story, teaching younger generations the importance of compassion and vigilance. The bicycle, once a symbol of his disappearance, was restored and placed in the town's small museum, a tribute to a child lost and found, a reminder of the value of every life. It stood there silently, telling a story of hope for anyone who would listen. While scars remained, time began to heal wounds. Linda and Tommy both understood that the road ahead would not always be easy, but they faced it together with courage. The darkest shadows of the past no longer held dominion over their lives. Instead, a new light, one born from love, truth, and resilience, illuminated their path forward. As twilight settled on the town, the air was filled with a quiet peace, the kind that only comes when a long-awaited truth finally sets a soul free. The boy who vanished on his way to the candy store had returned, and with him came a timeless lesson. No matter how deep the darkness, hope can always find a way to shine through. Thank you so much for joining me on this unforgettable journey, the story of a boy who vanished but was never truly lost. It reminds us all that even in the darkest times, hope and love can light the way home. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel for more stories that inspire and move us deeply. Don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts or personal stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Your support means the world, and together we can keep these important memories alive. Stay safe, stay hopeful, and I'll see you in the next story.